Well, hello there, humans, bees, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and if you're lucky enough to be doing it too. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and I'm back with I called it the Stonqueror, because it's stonking. And I don't know, I just made that up. That's a heading. We can work on that. Let's call that a working title. I'm Bushka on Blitz. Welcome back to the channel. If indeed this is your first time here, stick around. You're going to have a great time. We're going to have a good time together. And this is the Tier 9 British heavy tank, the Conqueror. This is a well overdue revamp of an original review that was lost to the sands of time. It's basically still out there. It's still getting a heap of views in that because there's nothing else on channel about this tank. And it's not because I don't like this tank. At one time I called this my favourite Tier 9 heavy. Bloody hell, it's very close to still being that. And it might be for a number of reasons. Because I really value a good gun over pretty much everything else. When you get to a certain level in this game where you can start playing a tank individually and playing it to its strengths and minimizing its weaknesses, you can take things that have outstanding characteristics in one particular area and make them work for you very, very well. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love a lot of the tanks like that are in the British line, like the Centurion 1. I love the medium tank. I popped that out here the other day. The 701, the 4202. I get by with these tanks very, very well because they nearly always have just smashing guns. And that means you can do a lot of good things with them. A lot of people, when you start the game, they play all their tanks in very much the same manner. And it does a massive disservice to tanks like the Conqueror, for instance, to play it in the same way you'd play a Russian medium or a Russian heavy at Tier 8, because that is literally how people tend to play these tanks. And they say they're bad tanks and they can't get to grips with them and it doesn't work, and it's because they don't adjust. And adaptability in this game is everything. Every map is different. Every map has different areas on it where your tank will succeed. When they make a map in Blitz, they spend a lot of time creating different areas for different types of vehicles where they'll work. And yet, we constantly blow that by just driving to the same spots on every map in every kind of tank we have, wondering why we don't get the same results. And a lot of the reason is because we're bad and the tank's being completely miscast. For instance, this is a Conqueror. It is not a very good side-scraping tank. It can do it in a pinch versus certain other tanks, but it's not a very good side-scraping tank. So I won't take it to town on Middleburg, really. I won't try and, hold the line on Falls Creek. Like, none of these things are things that this tank does well. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but if you've driven a Leopard before, well, you'd know that you can't afford to hit point trade, because every time there's an opportunity to hit point trade, you're going to lose it because they're going to pen you every single time. So you want to play the Conqueror a lot like that because its armor profile isn't actually that smashing. Now, I'm going to show you the secret, one of the little secrets that people don't really understand about this tank, and that's that you have a little nuke, and it's called Hesh. No other tank in its tier as a heavy tank has a Hesh pen like this thing. Hesh is high explosive squash head. I'm going to show you a little secret. That's a bat chat. I'm going to switch to Hesh. Boom. Stop the camera right there. 545 damage. That is your little nuke. 545. Why does it work so well? Look at all the grey on that bat chat. It's got 120 millimeters of HE pen. Even the MBT-70, which has outstanding high explosive damage with a 152 millimeter gun that has a 640 alpha HE pen, it has 90 millimeters of HE pen. You've got Hesh. Hesh gives you another 30% on top of that. Well, 33 and a third percent recurring if we're going to be very, very analytical about it. And that means that if you run up to a lot of tanks, you can just farm them. If they have, especially lower tier lights and medium tanks, if you can hit the sides of those tanks, there are areas there where you'll pen 9 times out of 10 with Hesh and put massive big numbers in, and it will absolutely inflate your stats. And you're going to see me make a lot of use of Hesh, the little nuke that exists for this tank and for a lot of the British lines, like the Centurion 701 and the FV422, we all know about the high pen hash there. But the 215B, if you saw my masterclass with Oxbow on the 215B, it has the same kind of crazy numbers. It has this beautiful high explosive shell that will pen for 120 millimeters of, like that is unheard of. Not every heavy tank's getting this, but people don't use it. They really don't use it. They don't use it to any effect, and it can be hard to get it to work in a tier 10 game. But what's not hard to get to work is your accuracy and your DPM. You are the number one rated DPM heavy in your tier. That's all there is to it. People, again, completely miscast this thing as an armor profile heavy tank. And while people, these are the same people that will sit there and tell you you're a coward or something for not pushing forward in any tank that's marked as a heavy. They will sit there and tell you that if you're a medium, your job is to spot for them. And while they're in spawn in their TD. And they think that TDs are at the back of the map. And this is all they are, and they're inflexible. Their inflexibility is the reason that there are 60% win rate players and 40% win rate players. You can't have one without the other. And there is absolutely no reason why you can't look at a tank on its own individual merits, take it out there, and do really, really well in it. And that's what you should be doing with the Conk. So remember, you have more DPM. If someone pushes up on you in a tier 8 medium, you are laughing your butt off. Not only because you can quite possibly pen them with Hesh, which gives you 3,500 damage per minute, but I'll give you an example. A T54 Mod 1, they think they are all that, and I can't tell you how many times I've had 54 Mod 1s, people who drive them, push up on me in a tier 9 tank and think they're going to do the business. You have a whole lot more in terms of hit points. You can see I've got 1,850 hit points. The Mod 1 has a very, very paltry 1,400 hit points. So you've got 450 more hit points. You have 614 more damage output per minute. You have 259 pen versus 175. And obviously that's a tier 8 medium. But the same thing happens with tier 9 mediums. They all seem to think that they can just push up on heavy tanks and that all heavy tanks are going to be slow, cumbersome beasts that have low damage outputs and are very, very easy to take advantage of if you're mobile. The Conqueror will soon set you straight if you run around treating it like that. It's also got the highest AP pen of any tank at its tier as a heavy. Now that's not a huge benefit though, when really the range on that is very, very small. There's a lot of tanks with 1mm less pen at this tier, so you don't really hold on to that as any great shakes. But what it has as well as that is an incredibly accurate gun. It's got the most accurate gun of any heavy in its tier. So 0.299 dispersion is outstanding. You've got the highest DPM, you've got Hesh pen that is absolutely ridiculous with 120mm of Hesh that gives you a round that will do 515 average alpha damage. And then to top that all off, you see that? That's Hesh again. Into the sides of tier 8 tanks. Thanks very much for coming. To top that all off, you have the best aim time of any heavy in your tier. And you can see the gun is ridiculously good. Well, there must be some negatives, and indeed there are. You are not the most mobile of tanks. A lot of people mistake the Conqueror for a heavium, and it is in fact a heavium leaning towards a medium with the gun, and that's all well and good, but the tank is wide. It likes big butts, and it cannot lie. If you have a look at this thing lined up against some other very, very big tanks of its same tier, it is just the widest load you've ever seen. It fills up the entire lane and then comes pouring out over the sides. It just doesn't fit in its trousers, if you get my meaning. So you can't really just hide this thing, but for all that, you've got to play very, very conservatively and use what's around you. And you can see I'm here on top of the ridge. Now it has gun depression, but it doesn't have a huge amount. This is another one of the misnomers, because mostly you get 8 to 10 degrees of gun depression on your tier 10 Brits and heavies and mediums and that kind of thing. You get 10 on the Conqueror, right? On the Carnarvon, and then you get 10 on your British mediums and all that kind of thing. And so you think, well, we've got gun depression, but you don't really. On the Conk, you've only got 7 degrees of gun depression, which is good. It's not terrible, it's not Russian, but it is by no way, shape, or means amazing. So that's a big downfall. Your mobility isn't amazing, your gun depression is amazing, and your armor profile is not amazing. The 215B, the tier 10 variant of this, its turret is drastically undersold. It's much, much, much stronger than people give it credit for. And I think for me, the key, and there you go, Hesh again, like 560. You are never going to have any troubles penning anyone like a Waffen Tractor, a Grill, an RU-251, STA-1, Type 61, Borsigs, a whole bunch of other lights and medium tanks if you can hit them in the right space. The sides above the tracks and below the turrets of Russian mediums. Like these are targets you will get to know well. And you'll get to know them well because you will take an immense amount of pleasure and joy in bopping them for 500 plus and making them think, what the hell just hit me? So you have that as an issue. So you really have to play this tank sensibly. And you have to know the maps. You have to know the areas you can go to on the maps. And you have to get very, very good at using hard cover in close proximity to the enemy. Because without that, you're just not mobile enough to pump out there. And you're no lightweight. You're a massive big tank. You can see, look at me. I'm waiting here for an opportunity. I've got that Hesh shell ready to go. There's a 61. We're going to get one in. Oh, and he moves and he blows around. But there you go. Have 580 and then burn. So you've done over 600. Again, Hesh is your little nuke. Tanks like this, medium tanks, when you get up close and personal with them, you can put such nasty big numbers into them. I mean, that's a low roll with Hesh, and we still did 460. That kind of DPM for medium tanks when you're facing them is brutal. Bro Dude Leg there with me in the bat chat, holding up his end. Big style. Again, we get a nice fire in that because that is a Yag Tiger, otherwise known as a matchbox. It just goes up. And you can use that gun handling, that pen and that aim time. Look at it. I mean, all the gun has to do is be pointed in the right direction and it comes good. And that pattern is a Hesh victim for sure if I can get up close and personal to him. But I don't want to risk it. We're just going to take a nice, easy shot. And then we're working positionally again. We've got hard cover on our right. We're able to push up here. We've got some Hesh shells for that bloke. Low roll on the Hesh. Wasn't a guaranteed pen, but we went for it. Usually you'd be lucky enough with that one, but not so there. We get another one into the side of the 49, and you can see tier 9 games. This thing is just a walloper. Even at tier 10, you can play it a little bit more passively and be every bit as successful. Why don't people do well in it? As I mentioned before, people play tanks in a very vanilla fashion. People will play an IS-3 or an IS-3 Defender or a Glacial or, an IS-5, and they'll get used to this heavy, derpy gun playstyle. And this is not that kind of tank. It's a finesse tank, despite the fact that it's bigger than a brick outhouse and it's got a soft armor profile relative to its tier as a heavy. All these things, they don't combine to make it an easy drive. But for all that, if you treat it with finesse and let it sing, then the gun will carry you home. If you don't, if you try and drive it all the way up to the front line and angle and bounce shots, you're going to be very, very disappointed. And not only that, but you won't be doing very well as a teammate. Like, your team's going to have a tier 9 heavy that gets bashed. The biggest thing I could say for this is don't listen to the clowns who are saying, go and be a heavy, go and angle up the front, go and side scrape, because the Conqueror quite simply doesn't have the armor profile to do that. I'm going to show you one more game, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the armor while I talk about it. Because the armor profile, I'll illustrate just why you're not going to treat this thing like a proper big heavy tank. On the side there, you have 51 millimeters of armor. That's not a lot. In addition to that, you have a spot there that is 6 millimeters of spaced armor. So great, stops heat. Excellent. But you also have tracks that are 25 millimeters of armor with 240 hit points. All that means is, say an IS-3 is looking at you, if you're angled up at even like 20 degrees, you're fair game. And to pull all the way back while side scraping means you expose the turret, and the turret has huge weak points either side of the gun, which means you're basically going to get shreked if you try and treat this thing like an offensive side scraper. So let's have a look now at this game. This is Middleburg. We've gone up and the rest of the team has stayed down in town. Our Yag Tiger is basically in spawn. I don't know what he thinks he's doing there, but he's going to be the biggest complainer of the entire team. He's going to have a proper go at the end, and he couldn't get further back again if he uninstalled the game. I like to go up here because then you get to kill their mediums as a whole and then go down. We would have been 2 tanks up and had the high ground if the rest of the team had to come up, but I digress. This is Middleburg, the age-old issue of Middleburg. What I've done is taken a massive DPM, like 2700 DPM, heavy with a whole big ass load of hit points, brought it up here, and stuck it right in the face of their mediums, and we're going to clear both their mediums. Our medium tanks bleed too much here. I don't know why one of our meds pushed up, but they did, and there was no need for it. They could have waited for me to get there and clear it, but they didn't. So instead, we end up in a situation here where we're vastly outnumbered now. The Cent 7-1's about to go down, and then he gets very aggressive for some reason and pushes down towards their spawn, rather than using the high ground that we actually paid for by losing that Super Pershing, who died all the way there. A Yag Tiger's going to have a whinge. Look where he dies. He's in spawn. He's next to 1. He is next to the 1 mark. I don't know what he was doing there. I mean, he's got the highest DPM gun in the game, in the entire game, but if he thinks it's going to work down there at the back of the map, you know, well, he probably deserves a loss, which is pretty much a guarantee given the fact that it's now 2-on-5. And I want to just highlight, though, aim time, accuracy, DPM. Look at this thing go. I mean, that Tiger 2 down there, bang, bang, bang. It is just fantastic. Ignore the Yag Tiger. He's making a muppet of himself live on national television. We missed this Hesh round. Basically, this is if the gun had 10 degrees of gun depression, it would be OP as all hell. I can't go any further than that with it. But because it's got 7, we have to extend out. We don't want to wait too long there, taking a shot. Their ST1 has pushed down. Our Cent is pushing into them. I don't know why, but he's pushing into them, and he's left himself wide open, which is rough. Poor old Balrog. He at least helped me clear the top. We're now down there. There's an IS-3, an SU-152 still to deal with, and an IS-5. I'm going to be using my hit point pool and the massive damage output of this little beauty here and trying to get shots in. Again, we don't muck around too much. Easily clear the IS-5. That Russian gun never had a chance at that kind of range. The IS-3 is pushing in. We blow this shot, I think. No, we nail it. The SU-152 is still there. The ST-1's team gives him a little bit of stick for this. I have no qualms whatsoever with what the ST-1 does. He is in there making sure they win the game. That is flat out the most important thing. And I have looked at this as a fantastic situation. If the ST-1 had pushed up, sure, they may well have done this easier, but I could just as well have cleared the ST-1, and then they would be in all kinds of dire straits. As it is, we're going to clear the 152. That's 6 kills, but the ST-1's going to cap it out and win it. And I'm like, oh, please, dude, don't do it, because that's like a RAS and a massive game, and oh my goodness gracious me. So we cleared the top flank, but it just wasn't enough. And that's fair enough, you can't win them all, but I think it goes to show the kind of finesse and ferociousness that goes hand in hand for the Conk. It's damage output, it's accuracy, it's aim time, it's penetration, it's little nuke with Hesh. Those are all things that you can turn into massive positives for you and your team, and actually help you to win games in a big way. If you treat her badly, she will respond in kind. If you treat her gently and use her to the best of her abilities, the Conqueror will sing all day long. Until next time, boys and girls, thank you so much for watching. I'm Bushka on Blitz. Look after yourselves. Stay safe on the battlefield.